If you want to meditate, meditate. If you don't want to meditate, meditate. If you want to give a talk, give a talk. If you don't want to give a talk, give a talk. So, Wapapong, or what in a chart, you see that the way my first years were obviously very difficult because didn't train my mind, hadn't any training, but the fact that Luangpor Cha and then subsequently Luangpor Sumedho, but especially Luangpor Cha, those first 2 years at Wat Pah Pong and the Sakas, the fact that there was just a form and a structure, and I kept surrendering to that, kind of kept me going. And, how many days did I want to meditate? Zero. How many days did I want to sit on a concrete floor with my knees up in the air? Zero. Uh, but I wanted to understand myself. So although my personality desire, say, what I want to do and what I don't want to do, was uh, superseded. Is that the word? My desire to understand my mind was stronger than the other desire. And so Buddhism to some extent is a exploration of desire, wanting, and wanting is neither right nor wrong. It's natural. And some wanting is wholesome and some wanting is unwholesome. So we're not against desire, and wanting to be free from my own suffering and wanting to understand my mind was a very good wanting, a very wholesome wanting. And then being encouraged by the society, Luangpo and others, um, to just keep watching and endure. I think back, that was the basic instruction. Anapanasati, first of all, I didn't understand Thai, and they were speaking Lao anyway, so I was utterly confused. I really was. And then the body it was very hot, and my digestion didn't work. And then I had jungle fevers of all kinds, et cetera, et cetera. So physically, the experience was probably not that easy, but I was young and I was strong. And I think I liked the challenge. I liked the challenge of being there before everyone, or being there on time, or sitting through with Rinpoche, whoever was sitting through the meditation. So that was the good part of my desire system. And then the bad part, or the suffering part, was the desire to get rid of and the desire to become. And vibhavatana and bhavatana. And obviously I had to differentiate between the two, but what kept me going was a schedule: morning chanting, evening chanting, Tamwat Chow, Tamwat Yen. The morning bell would go at 3 o'clock, I think, was it? 3:30, you had to be in the hall. So discipline, just simple discipline, a young guy who's undisciplined. And then sitting through until the end of the bell. So you never dreamed of leaving the hall before the bell rang, which is the same here. And those little things just added up to more and more mindfulness. And then as the mindfulness or awareness, or whatever we want to call it, became stronger, some kind of insight began to arise. I just began to understand myself more. So in the beginning, it was lots of confusion and uh, what am I doing here? But there was something bigger. There was always something bigger than those particular things. And then my wanting, I had to learn about my own wanting, and my wanting was very impatient. So I wanted to be enlightened tomorrow. And I had just arrived yesterday. And Rinpoche said, no way, Jose. Yeah, this is going to take a time. And they were not complicated instructions. It wasn't like he was giving me a detailed analysis from the Abhidhamma about Paticca. He said, Oton, 5 years, hang in there, Mapinlai, Mainea. So the instruction was very, very simple, but then also I didn't understand Thai. So maybe that's why the instruction was so simple. I had no, I had no choice. I just thought of that now. But I think my teachers, Luangpor, Luangpor Cha, Luangpor Sumedho, and others that I've had the good fortune to meet, I think they've all had a kind of a gift of simplifying the complex. And if you've listened to Luangpor Cha's in Thai in his teachings or Luangpor Sumedho's or read the books, that Luangpor Cha's constant reminder, meine, uncertainty. He would say that many times, many times, many times. That's a very simple phrase, meine, uncertainty. But to actually have the presence of mind, uh, to have the mindfulness to apply that word, that concept, that perception each moment of the day, that's very difficult. So you have to be quite present. And then to apply that to all the perceptions and interpretations of life that we have. What it did for me, I think, was it started to give me some distance. So if I use the word, let's say maybe I was annoyed at a fellow monk for having a bigger mango than me or something. Feel jealous about someone having more mangoes than me. It was sad. It was very, very sad because I was really hungry and greedy. And then, or just being angry at a monk, not because it was anything to do with the monk, because it was to do with my kilesa. And that's one thing I never understood. I didn't understand at the time, is that putting yourself in this situation is going to um, trap trap the kilesa, and they're going to come out. And one of the lines I think you've read from Luangpor Cha is that the tiger now is caged and it's going to roar because it wants freedom. It wants to escape, and you're just going to have to let it roar and not let it escape. Which really, the way I understood that was, well, now I've got no distractions. Now I can't. I'd been traveling for 3 years, so anytime I felt bored, I moved on, and I could distract and eat something. So now there are no distractions, and then the fears and angers and the kind of gross kilesa just would start to come up. And where do kilesa come up? Well, they get focused on someone else, don't they? Because they need a target. So anger needs a target. So anger is not proud. It will choose anyone, because anger likes a target. So someone does something and bang, they're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong. And then I think constantly the Luangpor Cha's instruction was, you don't have to get rid of the anger, just don't believe in it. And that was, I think, my nair. It's uncertain. Now, when I can have a perception about someone, a judgment about someone that they shouldn't be that way, and then I have enough mindfulness to say, yeah, but my nair, that creates distance. That creates distance. Um, that's not a big thing, but if we don't have space, of course, we're just caught in those things. So that's one thing we're trying to do in our contemplations, is how can you create space around the objects of your emotions, the objects of thought? How do you create space around that? In this morning, I was very much talking about because I think most of you are not into that very gross kilesa mode. You probably went through that a few years ago, like I did. Um, Now you have more subtlety, and the 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 belief in thought and the self-identity with thought and the self-creation of a sense of me in thought, that has to be somehow dismantled and not believed in. And that's the first, what we call the first fetter. And I think you know that teaching, the three fetters. Um, so this is a different way of talking about these ideas of stream entry that we sometimes get caught up into. So there, for me, there were ways of talking about aspects of Theravada Buddhism that were more about a belief, and there were others which were more about things I could reflect upon. So obviously, I prefer, like let's even talking about rebirth. Okay, that seems to be true, but I have no psychic abilities. I've I'm just a pretty ordinary guy in that way. And so that would be a statement of belief and faith. And my culture doesn't talk about rebirth. My parents never talked about rebirth. So I come to that idea, either I believe it or I disbelieve it or I'm indifferent. Um, so it's not important for me. It's not terribly important because I can work with it a bit. I can say maybe um, as a way of acceptance. If I meet someone and there's a great calamity, I can say to them, "Oh, maybe it's karma in that kind of way." But I don't find it as a working hypothesis, as a tool that I use. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's not really useful for me. But if I'm given something I can look at right now, a reflection, then that becomes a useful tool for me. So the ideas of the first three fetters, which I think you know, personality view, Sakkaya Ditthi, Silabbata Paramasa, belief in rites and rituals, Vicikicca, doubt, are the three things that in the way that Luangpor Sumedho taught me, and from the text, I think, are the three things that when they are in abeyance, then you are in the stream of Dhamma. When they're active, you're in the stream of ego. That's the way I understand it. So if you take Sakyaditi, personality view, the way I understand that is say, uh, so if I'm angry at the monk next to me and thinking, he's a terrible person and so on and so forth, and I am caught in that thinking, there is me and there's him, that is a sense of a self, personality view. And then if I then change that, and I shouldn't be angry, I'm a bad person for being angry, that's still a sense of me, being a person who shouldn't be angry. So both of those have that poison or nivarana of self-view. But if I then see anger as an object, and there's the knowing, then I begin to see that as dharma. It's the same feeling now, but now the attitude is one of wisdom rather than self. And that makes sense to me in terms of being in the stream of Dhamma rather than in the stream of ego and the stream of thought. And that can flip. So maybe, okay, I start to understand that with anger with this person, and then maybe I start to experience another mode of feeling like anxiety. Anxiety comes up. What am I going to say? What am I going to do? They don't like me. They're looking at me. Whatever it is, that's Sakkaya Ditthi. Because again, I have taken it personally. I have identified with it. Who is the I? That's another question. But there is identification with it. But then at some point, Luangpor Sumedho says to me, no. That's an object. You are not the fear. You're the awareness. That's who you really are. That's your real home, whatever language you want to use. And then I said, oh, yeah. And he says, and look at your body. What does your body feel like when there's fear? And, oh, yeah, fear feels like this. Tension feels like this. Okay, now I'm in Dharma. I'm seeing the fear as Dharma. And then I forget again. I wake up in the morning. Oh, it's going to happen. I don't know. And then, yeah, what does fear feel like? So I keep introducing language to let go of Sakkaya Ditthi. But the tendency towards this kind of coarse example, the tendency towards anger and fear is still very strong. So it's still kind of vipaka kamma or anusaya still coming up. But now I have more chance of knowing it as Dhamma rather than being a person who owns it. And that's when you start to feel the release of these things, because now it comes up, but now I don't invest any belief in it. Because I don't invest any belief in it, it manifests, stays for a while, and begins to dissipate. And these are the ideas of Nirodha as well. Things begin to cease in the mind. Like take something as simple as road rage. Let's say someone suffers from road rage, right? If maybe Bangkok people don't have road rage. They have road rage in the States a lot. Some, you have to be very cool in Bangkok traffic, but someone cuts you off and then we're going to get you, and you go in front of them and all this anger. This is maybe more an American movie. Um, and then the person says, that's bad news. I have to work on that. So they awaken to road rage as an object. But having indulged in that since they were 16 years old, and now they're 26 years old, for 10 years, anytime someone cut them off, it's going to come up again. That's the idea of vipaka. That's the idea of anusaya, that there is still potential for this to arise. So now, but the person's made a determination to know it as Dhamma, rather than, first of all, think I shouldn't have road rage or believe in the road rage. Both are actually the same kind of a thing. So then the road rage comes up and they hold on to and they don't lift their fist up or they don't yell or they don't swear. And over time, the road rage ceases. And that's a very important principle in liberation. But first and foremost, we have to see it as Dharma rather than as self. And for me, that's the way I use this idea of Sakyaditi. Others might use it differently. You then have to look at your own mind. Where does that sense of me as a person, where is it strongest in your self-identity? It might be that you feel, maybe you feel superior to others. And maybe you're whatever, and you look at others and you say, yeah, but I'm still better. And then you say, I'm still better than that one. Now, you may be better, but you're still conceited. There's still a sense of self. And then you look at that conceit, because conceit creates a sense of me and them. Or you may think, oh, I'm not as good as them. They're much better. They sit more still, and look at that. They come on time and they don't eat much dessert, and I'm terrible. That's still a conceit, right? It's still a me in a comparison to a other, and I'm not as good. Da, 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 da. It's still sakyaditi. It's still, so what you're doing is you're monitoring your thinking and not believing in any I, me and my making, ahankara, mimankara, beginning to just know that that's a thought, meine, come to the silence, feel the body. Then the Silabhata Paramasa part is, this is, I think, one of the great contributions Luangpor Sumedho has to our way of understanding that is, Silabhata Paramasa in our English translations tends to be translated as superstition. So I'm not superstitious. I mean, I'm a cool guy. I I don't believe in, and I'm just I'm not superstitious. So superstition in a Western sense would be kind of thinking if I well, it would be thinking that the Buddha image is the Buddha, right? Rather than it being a symbol that the Buddha's there and I'm going to pray to the Buddha and so on. And that would be kind of a Sakyadit, that would be a Siddhabhatta Paramasa. Or in Sri Lanka, uh, Malati will know this. You have this thing called this deity called Kataragama, and Kataragama is a deity in Kataragama, huh? I think, and it's the place where every Sri Lankan and his mother goes to ask for favors, and they go and they offer coconuts and things. The priests make a good penny on this one. And then if you want to pass an examination or get a job in the civil service, you make a trip to Kataragama, make a pilgrimage, make your offerings. And I think if I have it correctly, you say to Kataragama, if you give me that job, then I'll come back and give you some whatever. Have I got it right? Am I getting there? Okay. So that is a bit materialistic. Now, it might work, might not. But I suspect that might be Siddhabhatta Paramasa if you did a statistical analysis. I'm not sure. I don't know. But that whole idea is about a me and and an activity. And if I do this activity, then I'll be safer, I'll be happy, I'll be successful. So that can apply in culture. So we have a lot of cultural conditioning about what we should be. How a woman should be, how a man should be, how a monk should be. Say, for instance, when I when we came to England in 1977, Luangpor Sumedho and myself, Ajananda Viradhammo, I was always nervous that I would. It was also almost like Luangpor Cha and Luangpor Liam were looking over my shoulder. Are you behaving yourself? Are you a good bhikkhu? This kind of dad and he wasn't. He trusted us, but there was always this kind of fear. Am I going to get this wrong? And in fact, I kind of, one of the regrets I have when I went back to Toronto just before that, so that's 1977, I hadn't seen my mom for 5 years, probably, yeah. And she wanted to hug me, and I wouldn't let her hug me. And I've regretted that all my life. All my life. I still have memories of that. Oh, you stupid monk. Because what does it matter? What does it matter that, your mom wants to hug you? I've just like, I've really, it's been kind of a really painful memory. That's Silabbata Paramasa. That's not Vinaya. Nothing in the Vinaya says that you can't love your mom, right? So another monk might say, no, no, that was Vinaya. But I realized it really hurt my mother. And then I tried to rectify it and took care of her for a few years. But it's still a kind of really painful memory. Oh, it comes up a surprising amount of time. So that was Sila Bhatta Paramasa. I was I was in a foreign situation, although it was my mother's home. It was the first time I had been with my family in the robe. I was nervous about being a monk in this situation, but it's your mother, and she's a great lady. But the cultural attachment was stronger than my intuitive love of my mom. I didn't hurt her in anything, but it did hurt her in that. That's a kind of extreme example of Sila Paramasa. So how that would manifest would be, again, as a sense of self, and a sense of sometimes they're so embedded in you, you don't even realize you're doing it. I think probably like women and clothing and how you look in society is probably much, much stronger for women than for men because of the way the culture thinks you should be and thinks you should behave and such like. It can come up in, I think, also in, say, in terms of dogma, where you read things and then you believe that you have to do that. So sometimes, um, in terms of maybe meditation, you have to maybe get these levels or get these attainments or complicated things like that. And then you're driven by dogma rather than driven by inquiry, investigation. Ajahn Sumedho, when he began to be an abbot away from Luangpor Cha, um, he, like, I think the first year of Wat Nana Chat, if I remember correctly, he tried to emulate Luangpor Cha's style. And after a while, you could see it just wasn't working because he's not Luangpor Cha. And then he just realized, no, I got to do it my way. And then, of course, the monks would complain, you're not like Luangpor Cha. He said, correct. Very, very good. I'm not Luangpor Cha. Very astute of you to notice that. And and then he had to get his own confidence about being who he was, whatever that was in terms of leadership. So that's a kind of cultural conditioning, right? From having been close to this very, very great teacher and being embedded in Thai society as a bhikkhu for 10 years, and then trying to be someone he wasn't. And that always involves a sense of self, too. I'm someone that should be functioning in some way. So maybe you can think of your own examples. Like I can imagine, like I've never had children, I've never been a mother, not that I remember. But I imagine, like, if a mother doesn't like her child, that must happen. I don't know. That would be really difficult. You just find your child is obnoxious. Boy, that would be difficult. That would be really, and yet that's the way it is. That's the way it would feel. And if you're aware of that, then you could just be aware. This is what it feels like. But the culture would not approve of that at all. You should be this and you should be that, and you should like this and you should like that, um, and so on and so forth. So that's the second one. And the third one is Vichikicha, is doubt. And I think you've heard me, all of you, I speak about that one a lot. So doubt is a natural phenomena that is necessary. If you didn't have doubt, you would never inquire. So if I was in the forest and I heard a bear coming through the forest, and I don't know, that's a strange sound, and I just stood there, the bear would eat me. So nature asks me, have fear, have doubt. It might be a good thing. You could run away from the bear, roughly speaking. But doubt also is a part of our intellect. And the more we cultivate intellect, the more doubt there is as well. It's just the nature of a lot of thinking. And doubt is a necessary part of investigation, but doubt is still in the realm of sankhara. So doubt is still a constructed thing. And although I might, like, if I'm again pragmatically speaking, if I'm trying to do this weaving design, this Scandinavian weaving design, and I'm having troubles with color and design, then that doubt really helps me do this, do that, do this, do that. But at some point, I get crippled by doubt. Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do this? Should I do that? And I never weave. So at some point, I have to go beyond that. But I think the most important part of doubt is that if you cannot see doubt as an object, you will never go beyond thinking. Why do I say that? Maybe that's too absolute. That's probably too absolute, but the idea is there. Um, so what happens when intellectually, when doubt arises, say, especially in meditation, you want, the wanting mind wants an answer. Take worry, say, how worry works. The future's unknown. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. Then you start to think of some possibility, negative possibility, which might happen. And it might happen, is true. So that negative possibility is very uncomfortable. So you start to think. You think, so that negative possibility is doubt or fear. What's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. So you start to work with that doubt by thinking, if that happens, then I'll do A, I'll do B, and do C. And then you think it through and you feel confident. That might work. You get to the place of confidence, tanha's not there. Feels good. 10 minutes later, I forgot. If I do A, B, and C, then actually maybe D, E, F will take place. So I better rethink this. Doubt arises again. So then, okay, if I do D, E, F, maybe I'll do X, Y, Z. And then you think, okay, I got it. I got the solution. So you feel confident again. Sabai. And then someone says, yeah, but did you realize that if you do X, Y, Z, it's going to lead to 1, 2, 3? Oh, I never thought of that. And then there's a doubt. So what's happening? Doubt is unpleasant. And the nature of doubt and the nature of tanha is that you want the pleasant. And what feels pleasant to you is the confidence of a conclusion. Now, that is very important in engineering work or legal work or whatever you want. But in terms of Dhamma, you're trying to get beyond thinking, and you can get very much stuck in thinking by always running around with having a conclusion, having an answer. That's why I'm somewhat dismissive of words. Excuse me for being so dismissive of words, but I think we get that's a good example. Is this awareness? Is this mindfulness? Is this consciousness? Is this conscious presence? Which is it? We can get very trying to get a fixed definition of things rather than see that words point to different kinds of realities. So if you're and there's a certain kind of personality, we call it moha jarita, right? The kind of delusion type of personality that is always doubting, always going and not seeing doubt as an object. They become the subject who wants to know. And that's different than a dosa jarita, a person who is always angry or someone who is kind of very greedy. So it's a kind of personality type. It's also culturally very strong because we think a lot. We use intelligence a lot. And so that kind of a person will come to me and like classic questions about rebirth. I gave a talk in Malaysia last year, big group of people, and I finished the talk. Any questions? This older gentleman comes up, slowly walks up, very dramatic, very theatrical. They put a seat down for him in front of me, and so here we go. What's this guy about? And Venerable Sir, and he's got a pencil and paper. Can you please tell me how rebirth works? And I look at the guy. I said, how many times have you asked that question? I ask it to every monk. And you still haven't got an answer? No. not to my satisfaction. I said, go back and sit down. So he, like he just loved that kind of a question, loved that kind of, there's no answer to it. There's no answer to it. Um, yeah, so that kind of a person, those that would just can spend a long time like taking a word and taking it apart and doubting, or self-doubting. Am I worthy? Am I good enough? Am I up to the mark? Or should I do this or should I do that? And it's not a doubt which is really healthy. It's a doubt which is quite often based upon fear or whatever it is. So the antidote to that is to see that if my thinking mind creates a sense of self, so it's the same idea around the doubt, then that's attachment. And in terms of Dhamma, you can know the difference between doubt and anger, can't you? There's a different feeling. You can know the difference between not being sure and being sure. And that which knows the difference is awareness. And that's not a that's not an intellectual conclusion. It's just knowing doubt is doubt. And if you do that and you allow yourself uncertainty, I don't know. I don't know. And you allow your mind goes to silence. Naturally, it goes to silence. And so much of the Sino-Buddhist world, like the Chan world, the Zen world, also Advaita, they will use doubt as a way of bringing the mind to silence. So the classic way is, who am I? Right? You find that used throughout Buddhist texts and that. So now that's a question. Who am I? If you try to answer that, you go bonkers. You just keep thinking, I am Viradhammo. Who said that? I said that. Who said that? So it's endless. But if you just say, who am I? And don't put an answer in there, it actually makes your mind very alert. Who's sitting here? And that's one of the ways that some traditions deal with thinking. So your mind is thinking about something, you notice it, then you put in the thought, who's thinking? And rather than having an answer, you notice the silence of awareness. A doubt can be very helpful to actually, like if I ask you, um, what's the color of the floor? Then you look. You might describe the color of the floor, but you look because it's a question. And before you answer it that it's a gray speckled floor, you have the silence of the mind. In I think in Korean Buddhism, the the Roshi will walk around and sometimes just yell, "What?" And there's no answer. So you can use doubt to come to the silence of the mind. But if you have the type of mind which is always trying to figure things out, is this right? Am I doing this right? That's just thought. Try not to go there. Just say, "Meine," uncertain. I don't know. I don't know. So these three, to me, Sakyaditi Silabhata Paramasavichikcha, for me, and from the text, which I understand, when these are not operating, then you're in the stream of Dhamma. You know thought is thought, you know feeling is feeling, you know perception is perception, you know memory is memory, you know body is body, arising and ceasing, arising and ceasing, arising and ceasing. When you get caught by these three, you tend to create a sense of self. And then you're no longer in the stream of Dhamma, but you're in the complexity of ego, in the complexity of thought. And if you can then just stay away from those as they come up, and then you have to trust. So as I going back to it was a very long one, and I didn't have anything to say. Um, too much coffee. It's his fault. But, but just go back to the fear thing. again, as I said, so the fear comes up, but now I recognize it as Dharma, then it has a chance to dissipate. And that's why we say be patient. It will cease. It will cease. Don't take it personally.